Hello, today I'm going to talk about how a knitting machine carriage actually works. Now, in order to do that, I've got three carriages to look at. I've got a carriage from a very simple push button machine. I've got a fairly standard brother knitting machine carriage, and I've also got, very sorry for itself, a essentially scrap Knitmaster carriage, which we will have a brief look at the end. It mostly works in the same way, but there are one or two details which we're going to need to have a look at. But for today, we're going to concentrate on the brother mechanism, which is extremely similar to the way that Knitmaster mechanisms work. So I'll just get rid of this carriage, and then we'll have a look. Now, we do have a problem with this particular type of carriage, which is that if we turn it over and have a look, it looks incredibly complicated. So we're not going to start here. We're going to start with a simpler carriage. Let's get these needles back. Right, this carriage here is the carriage for a KH588, okay, and it's much simpler than your punch card carriages, but it does enable you to see what's going on, at least to begin with. So there's three pieces of jargon I want to introduce you to, which we're going to talk about. Piece of jargon number one is cams. This is a cam. It is a moving part which helps direct needles one way or another. Part number two is the entry point. That's the point at which the needles come into the carriage on the left or the right hand side. And jargon number three is the track, which is what the needle does as it moves through the carriage and is directed through like that. Okay, now starting off with this carriage, we can see that there are a number of possible tracks that the needles can follow through. And if you have a look in the centre, the central tracks are cast in plastic and are therefore not particularly changeable, which does make it simpler to understand what's going on. Okay, so let's line this carriage up with the actual needles, and we'll see where the entry points might be. So our first entry point for a needle would be here. This is the standard working position. There is an entry point here for the non-working position needles, where they just go straight through, the track goes straight through and nothing at all happens. That's very boring, so we're not going to look at that. So we're going to look instead at the first entry point, which is here. This is standard, no patterning. This is precisely what's going on. Boring, ordinary knitting. Okay, the second entry point is when your needles are selected into what is normally called the D position or B position on some machines. Okay, and that's where you're going to be doing at least some patterning. This particular carriage has got a D part 2 mechanism. This is a different track which isn't on the normal brother carriages, but we'll talk about later. And then finally, there's a track at the front for holding position. We're mostly going to concentrate on the main channel and the selection channel. Okay, so in order to do this, I'm going to take a knitting needle. This particular one is knackered, it's bent, so it doesn't matter if I break it, but we're going to follow it as it goes through a normal everyday carriage. So in it comes here. Okay, it comes in here. Now the point is, it's only going to move backwards and forwards if it's forced to. Okay, so it's going to carry on moving in a straight line until it hits something. And the first thing that it hits is this thing, which pushes it forwards and down into the standard knit track. This is the one that's towards the front of the machine here. Okay, and it gets forced down here, comes out where it grabs the yarn, gets pulled back a little bit. Okay, just to close the latch. Then it doesn't move down here because there's nothing forcing it to move down here. So it just carries on like that until this cam forces it to pull backwards all the way up here, where it goes past this cam and exits out the standard entry point there, exit point. One interesting thing to note is that if you adjust the stitch tension, what happens is it makes these cams here pull it back further or less far. So that changes how big the loop is. So one more time, in we come, forced down, into the main knit channel, up we go, past the stitch size cam, and out we go. Fabulous. Now you may know that when you select needles to do patterning, it moves the needles forward into the patterning channel. Now if you haven't got any buttons pressed or any settings set up, then all that happens is it comes in this channel, okay, and then it gets pushed up and joins the main knitting channel, and off we go, and it does exactly the same thing. Okay, so if no buttons are pushed, it just does the normal thing. Fabulous. Okay, so now let's have a look at the first cam we're going to have a look at, which is the slip stitch cam, and it's just one. There it is. Okay, and if I push it, it moves. I can make the one on the other side move as well, but for the purposes of moving left to right, we'll just use this cam. Now let's see what happens if we come in on the normal channel, on the knit channel. Well, now instead of being pushed down into the knit channel, we are pushed up and into a channel in which absolutely nothing happens. Okay, sorry, my boat's being moved around a bit by a passing boat. Let's do that again. Okay, just go straight through and nothing happens. So if you don't select a needle in slip stitch mode, it will do nothing at all. It will completely ignore the yarn. You'll end up with a slipped stitch. However, if you come in the selection channel, okay, here we go in here, okay, then you still get pushed down into the knit channel and it will knit as normal. Okay, so with that, just that one cam changes it from knit everything to only knit needles in the selection channel. Okay, our next option is tuck, which is the same as slip, but can you see there is a tuck cam which is coming up there. Okay, so this time if we have a look at the selection channel, they all just knit as normal, as we've discussed before. But if we have a look at the main channel, this time, instead of being pushed through this plain channel, it gets pushed down here, okay, where it doesn't go far enough forwards to pick up the yarn. Sorry, my apologies, it does go far enough forwards to pick up the yarn, but it doesn't go far enough backwards to loop the previous loop through it. So in fact, it picks up the second loop of yarn in with the current loop of yarn and then pulls them both back and off you go. So if you're going to come down the main knit channel, you'd actually push the loop of yarn behind this needle, and then when you pulled back again, it would slip it over and form a new stitch. This one pushes it forwards a little bit, enough to pick up another second loop of yarn, so you've now got two loops in there, and then it pulls them back and off it goes. So that's the tuck cam. Right, now in this particular carriage, that's basically it. This carriage does have a third option, which is multicoloured, but it works very, very differently to a punch card machine. In fact, if you have a look, you can see you've got this multicoloured cam, and what that is doing is, in this particular a version of the knitting machine, actually the needles are selected forwards to the multicoloured cam, and then these ones go through knit as normal, as you'd expect, and the ones that come through either of these two get pushed right up, okay, where they then go through and they essentially go through earlier than you otherwise would. So these ones, whilst they do knit, they are too late to pick up the loop of yarn. These ones will pick up the loop of yarn. So if you just did that, you'd actually end up with a whole bunch of drop stitches. But what you actually do in this particular model is that you lay in yarn manually across the ones that are really, really forwards, and then they knit as normal. And you don't lay in yarn manually across the ones that are back, and they pick up the yarn from the main feeder and they knit. It's a nice solution, but it's not the one that's used in modern punch card knitting machine carriages, or indeed with Brother in their electronic knitting machine carriages. So let's have a look at this slightly more complicated version. And I say slightly more complicated, if you have a look, these tracks here are exactly the same as the ones that were cast in plastic on the simpler machine, but they can actually move. So if you have a look and see, you can see that we still have one single slip stitch cam, as we'd expect. By the way, this carriage is totally unrestored, so bits of it are a bit sticky. And then you still have a tuck cam as well, you can see there. But what we have additionally is we have this thing, okay, which is actually 4 separate cams which move, and these are the fair isle cams. So have a look at them again. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, actually only 2 for one direction and 2 for the other direction, so it's actually only these 2 that we're interested in. Now, again, if you have a look at the entry points for this particular carriage, it has only a select entry point or a main entry point. Now, if we just do it plain and follow the main track, okay, you can see it does the same movements as the other one did, but you've got more metalwork here, but it's following the same path. However, if this comes in on the normal track with the multicolour button selected, down we come. Okay, that's fine. It picks up the yarn, no worries. That's a bit tight, that. Okay, and then it goes through there, out it comes as normal. So that one goes completely as normal. However, if it comes in the selection track, can you see what happens is it does knit as normal, but it stays longer, stays further forwards for longer. Okay, so what that means is by the time we're down here, instead of being here as it is on the first track, it's here. Okay, there's the difference. And that difference means that it reaches slightly further forwards and picks up the secondary yarn, which is held further forwards than the primary yarn, and then up it goes. It's actually a really nicely elegant solution, although it does require a lot more cams. However, that is the sum total of how the machine actually does its various stitches. Now, if we just have one final look at this carriage, which is a Knitmaster carriage. Now, all the brother machines rely on the needles being selected and brought forwards by some mechanism, whether it's punch card or manual or push button or electronic or whatever. Apart from that, they all work the same. But the Knitmaster machines do something different. Here are our 2 entry points. I'll do it from this side this time. Here are our 2 entry points, and in fact you've got 3 entry points. Entry point number 1 directs all needles across the back of this and through, yada yada yada, out, okay, as you'd expect. So with these, they're called Russell levers, in that position, which is the forward position, yes, that's right, forwards position, everything knits as normal regardless of what you do. With it in the back position, all needles go past this particular device here. And can you see you've got 3 little paddles that are down and most of them are up. And that is selected, let me just unselect them all. That is selected by this thing here as it goes past the punch card. Okay, so as it goes past there, it transfers that onto these things. Can you see some of them are down, some of them are up? And what happens is, as the needle comes through here, let's get the needle again. As the needle comes through here, it's either hits one of these or it doesn't. And if it hits one of these, it is pushed forward like that. And if it doesn't hit one, it just goes straight through. Okay, and if it does hit one, it's pushed forward, and if it doesn't, it goes straight through. And then that's selecting you going through the normal things as usual. You've got a selection of cams, which we've talked about before, okay, which move. They're slightly different on the Knitmaster machine in that you can't control these individually, either both go or neither go. But also, the disadvantage of the Knitmaster machine is that it selects them on the way in, then it does the normal thing, and then it spits them out the end, which means that you can never see the selection because the selection is happening whilst the carriage is over the needles. You can also not hand select the needles. I mean, you can hand select the needles, but it is significantly more of a pain in the bum to do so because it's incredibly sensitive to whether or not it goes down this channel or this channel. So you can hand select them, but it's more of a pain in the bum. It does have some advantages too as well. It means that the carriage is the complicated bit and the bed is incredibly simple, and it also means that If you go to an electronic machine, you can't use these carriages, you have to put a new carriage on it, but that also means therefore that you can potentially make an electronic carriage for a punch card machine and have both punch card and electronic in one machine, which you definitely cannot do with a brother. So then a look at the selection and cam mechanisms of various carriages. I hope that was interesting. I think the next video I'll make is talking about how the different needle selection methods work. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.